This child of yours is destined for the rise and fall of many, Jerusalem, and you yourself, your heart, a sword will pierce. You know, Joseph and Mary did everything according to the dictates of the law. The dictates of the law, it says today, reminding us that they fulfilled their obligation of purification and to bring Jesus forward. And that would mark both Mary and Joseph's life, but also Jesus' life. He did everything according to the law. And yet Jesus suffered terribly. Suffered terribly throughout his life. And to the point of death on a cross. A brutal, humiliating way to die. And Mary herself suffered greatly too. I'm not sure which is harder, actually, is to suffer pain one's own self or to watch somebody yourself, somebody who you love, somebody who you care for, and to watch them suffer. I think watching somebody else you love suffer is harder because you feel so powerless. Especially for those of you, I'm sure, who have experienced this, watching your maybe your parents get sick and get old and get very, very fragile and suffer greatly. Or maybe it's a child, even harder to watch, is to watch your own child suffer and to be so helpless in that moment. You see, Mary watched her son suffer greatly. This prediction by the prophet Simeon is very real. And the climax of that suffering for her was at the foot of the cross. Now, we have to examine this because it's very important how Mary suffered. It wasn't just that she suffered, and this is a mark of a disciple. So in life, it's more of not what happens to us, but how we react that happens to us defines us. And here's what Mary does. Mary at the foot of the cross does not fall down broken on her knees, collapse to the ground, broken by this act of violence, this terrible injustice. No, she doesn't. She is, the way it's recorded, she stands at the foot of the cross. She stands at the foot of the cross as if to be defined, because standing is a sign of strength. It's a sign of you will not break me. So she stood at the foot of the cross and embraced that suffering and made sure her son could see her till his last breath. Now that is a model with how to suffer. And what is it she's doing? She is standing defiant in the ugliness, the violence, the hatred, the divisiveness of this moment, the sinfulness and the utter ugliness of this moment. She stands defiant, quiet, and she absorbs in all that hatred of the world and looks upon her son with love. And her son looks back with that same love and gives her to John, the beloved disciple. See, in that we have a model for our suffering. Is that is to not allow the suffering in our life, which does come in many different ways, sometimes in more ways than we care. And that in that suffering we stand defiant. And Ron Rolheiser has a beautiful way of saying this. He says that we're called to be like a water purifier. That we take in all the hatred, the bitterness, the anger, the frustration, the hatred, the unforgiveness, and the war. And we absorb it inside of ourselves and we purify it. And we give back the pure water of kindness, gentleness, forgiveness, love, and in the end, peace. See, that is our role. Our role is to stand defiant in the eyes of injustice. To stand up for those who are broken, those who are wounded, those who are pushed to the sides of society, and to stand up to the injustice and to transform that injustice into kindness, gentleness, forgiveness, and love and peace. See, what happens to us is only part of the story. The real story of discipleship is how do we react to what happens to us. See, this is where they first, from the prophet Malachi, we hear a different metaphor. And it's a metaphor of a silver refiner's, or a gold refiner's lyre. And I don't know if you know how how silver or gold are purified, is they're heated up to their melting point. And then all the impurities bubble up to the top. And then the lyre is the refiner just skims off all the impurities on top. And then you have pure silver and pure gold underneath. And what Malachi is saying to us is that we will be tested, that we will be put into this fire of the refiner's fire. And that all the impurities of our life will rise to the top and be skimmed off. And that we must allow that to happen for us to enter into the kingdom of God. It's a powerful way of looking at how trials and sufferings and if you would, tests in our life can purify us. So it's what we do when suffering happens, not what suffering does to us, but how we react to suffering in our own life. Now, as I said earlier, it's harder to watch somebody else than it is whom we love to suffer than it is for ourselves to suffer, I think. But that's what we're called to do in disciples, and that's what we do as community. When we love one another, we are willing to be there for their lowest and the hardest moment. If you've ever been at a moment when somebody in your life has been dying or is very sick, there's no need for words. There's need for loving presence. That's what they yearn for. The assurance of our loving presence. You see, that is the Marian way. That's what Mary did for Christ. It's what Christ did. It's the Christian way. And it's the disciples' way, what you and I are called to do. It's to stand with those who are broken, those who are in fear. And at this moment, maybe those are some of the immigrants in our community who are fearful today now for their life. Maybe it is for those who are broken and wounded through some fault of their own, or maybe not fault of their own. That they are broken in marriage. Maybe they are broken in body. Maybe they are broken in mind. But we are called to stand with them. To stand and to take in all the ugliness and the bitterness and the war of life, and to absorb it, transform it, and give back love, give back peace, give back gentleness and kindness. That is the Marian way. It is the Christian way. And every one of us is called to walk that way and to follow the dictates of the law.